Okay, welcome to today's presentation about improving ECG's data intelligence through data governance or with data governance. Welcome. A little housekeeping before we get started. In regards to research, there's two types, primary and secondary, that were conducted for this presentation and the supporting paper. First one, primary, was done through an interview process with Mr. Tripp Humphrey, a data scientist and consultant with over 10 years experience. And secondary research was done through credible websites and news articles. Today's objectives: one, will be identifying data importance inside of ECG's business, what it means. We'll be introducing data governance, what concepts and framework it is. We'll define ECG's data governance objectives, and we'll provide some core action steps that ECG can use to get started within data governance. So we'll get started with data, and you may have heard this before, data is the new oil. So just like oil was in the Industrial Revolution to catapult business, data is the same for business today. It's critical. Some stats about this. In 2020, there was a study done by Branca for Seed Scientific. It's estimated there's about 44 zettabytes of data in the world, and you can create 1 zettabyte to 1 billion terabytes, quite large. And in 2025, they predict there'll be 175 zettabytes created worldwide, which is an increase of 133%. And if we look at the breadth of this data, it ranges from research papers to consumer spending habits, social media, tweets, and media consumption in the form of Netflix, Amazon, that kind of thing. Why is this important? Because we use data for decision-making processes every day. Several factors in why data is important in this. One, it establishes a high level of confidence, right? So the more data you have, the more confident you will feel in your decisions. It reduces risks overall. Again, more data that you have, the better decisions you'll make, the less risk you encounter. And of course, there's increased cost savings with all of this. Again, going back to having lots of data. So in essence, data doesn't lie. We all know that. And when you have decisions that are backed up by data facts, you get rid of confusion and any ambiguity inside of the decision-making process. So let's take a look at ECG at a glance. The organization has 13.2 million members with over 10,000 employees. We're established inside of 14 states with 2 U.S. territories. We're the second largest club in the AAA Federation, and we're fast-tracked to continue that growth. And currently we have an executive level mandate to move all our data systems and sources into the cloud for consumption. So we're quite broad and diverse. Taking a quick look at just a fraction of the data that already exists inside of the data lake. And the data lake is a central repository that we currently have implemented in Google Cloud Platform, where all our data sits and resides for consumption. It's currently around 60 terabytes, and we average about 2% growth monthly. And we can take a look at the data is broken down into different data sets, with discovery and strategic as the primary. Discovery data sets are basically the raw data that exists inside of the lake. Strategic data sets are those where we have data that has been more curated for consumption by the end user. So looking at ECG's current data intelligence state, ECG lacks some of these core data intelligence key components. One is that we don't always understand the data points that are being captured. We're getting a lot of data information coming in and out, but we don't always know. Oops, let's run back real quick, sorry. We don't always know the data points that we're capturing inside the organization. We don't always know how data is defined, and when we talk about the definition of data, what does the definition mean? For example, membership, how do we define what a member is inside of ECG? Is it by first name, by last name? Do we include the middle initial? Do we include the social security number? Do we include address? So we don't have that defined at an organizational level. We don't always know where the data lives. We have some ideas of our source systems, but we don't know exactly which data points live in which one of those systems, right? So how the data is being used, we don't understand exactly how it's being distributed out in the wild and being consumed by agents, by staff, by anybody that might be using it. and more importantly, how the data is being secured. We have a very rudimentary level of security of our data currently in the lake, but that could have room for improvement. So how do we help mitigate some of this? We do that through something called data governance. Data governance is really a framework that any organization can use to manage their data. When we talk about framework, we talk about things like concepts of policies, procedures, tool sets, and that kind of thing. In fact, Stedman and Vaughn define data governance as a process of managing the availability, usability, integrity, security of the data at an enterprise level, and it's all based off internal data. So in short, it's actionable, it's a framework, and it allows stakeholders in the organization to identify and meet their information needs. So what are the objectives of data governance? What are the goals? What does it accomplish? It ensures that data is secure, trustworthy, documented, auditable, and managed, all critical to any organization in today's world. Provides the highest level of data quality through all phases of the data lifecycle. The phases of the data lifecycle start from the source system to how it transforms to its end state for consumption, right? So data governance looks to say, what is this data? How do we define it? Where does it live? And how does it move throughout the process? Some of the benefits that we get from this: increased data value. So the more information we have, the more we have the data that's governed, the data becomes more valuable to the organization. We increase company revenue overall through cost reductions and that kind of thing. And we have better issue resolution through the data process. And of course, we get to standardize our data systems, because the more that data governance comes in and creates this framework, the better that we understand what systems contain which data. So how do we define success for data governance? Well, Chip Humphrey defines it in several key components here. One is that we have to accept that the process will never end. It will never be 100% correct. That's true. Data governance is a living thing. We have to understand that documenting a chaotic truth is more preferable to some orderly delusion. So it's better just to be able to start capturing information than to have just to sit there and wait for things to come into some kind of solidified order. And we have to embrace leadership, transparency, and access. So the recommendations that we have to get started with data governance inside of ACG: we have to make data governance a top priority and get secure executive level support. Everything flows from the top down in an organization. Executives are at the top, and it's critical that we have their buy-in and support throughout the entire process. We need to identify the key stakeholders that own the data, and we have to implement a data governing body that they're all a part of to help make decisions of what data is and how it lives and moves throughout the organization. We need to orientate the organization on what data governance is. Everybody in the organization should understand that we have some kind of framework, some methodology for maintaining and managing data. We have to determine the minimal and maximum amount of policy and procedures that we're going to be putting in place, right? We don't want to overburden the organization with too much policy, too much procedure, and we don't want to have too little because it won't be effective, so we have to find that sweet spot. We have to implement an enterprise level data governance tool. That's critical. We have to be able to understand, to be able to capture data points, business terms, translations, transformations, and where we have to understand the true lineage of the data, where it starts and where it ends. And we have to understand key metrics about the process. We have to know when we're hitting marks and when we're not hitting marks, right? So those key metrics are things like, where do we start, where do we solidify our data inside of the source systems, where is it at in the transformation process, and where is it at an end state, and are we meeting marks by those measures? And of course, we have to understand that it's a living process, as stated in the previous slide, and we need to be tending to it to be successful. And that is my presentation. I appreciate you listening. Thank you very much.